My name is Maren Holt, and I was 29 when my parents sold the one thing my grandmother left me before I even knew she was gone. Not the jewelry, not the furniture, not the money in her savings account. The house. The little blue house at the end of Renfield Road, with the crooked mailbox, the wild roses climbing the fence, and the kitchen window that looked straight out over the peach trees. My grandmother called it Sparrow House because every spring, birds nested under the porch roof and sang so loudly you could hear them from the upstairs bedroom. She told me once, when I was 11 and sitting at her kitchen table with flour on my hands, "Maren, this house will know you, even when people pretend they don't." I didn't understand that sentence then. I thought she meant the house felt warm. I thought she meant memories. I did not know she was giving me a warning. The morning after her funeral, my father sat across from me at the dining room table and said, "Your mother and I handled everything. You don't need to worry." I believed him. That was my mistake. 2 weeks later, I found out they had accepted a cash offer from a developer to tear Sparrow House down and build 4 rental units on the land. They told the buyer they were the rightful heirs. They told the attorney there was no objection from the family. They told me Grandma had wanted it this way. And for almost one whole day, I thought they had won. Then I opened the last envelope my grandmother had left in my name. Inside was one paper, one signature, one sentence that changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, hit like and subscribe if stories about family betrayal and quiet justice are the kind that stay with you. And drop your city and local time in the comments. I always like knowing where people are listening from. Now let me take you back to the first time Sparrow House saved me. I was 11 years old this summer. My parents stopped pretending they liked having me around. That sounds harsh. I know it does. But sometimes the truth sounds cruel because the people who lived it learned how to say it gently. My father, Russell Holt, owned a small insurance office in Benton Ridge. He wore pressed shirts, spoke carefully in public, and always looked like the kind of man who knew exactly what the right answer should sound like. My mother, Mary Ann, was softer on the outside. Church committee, floral dresses, thank you notes written in blue ink, a woman who could make a casserole for a grieving neighbor and then come home and not ask her own daughter why she had been crying. I had a brother named Callum. He was 2 years younger than me. And from the day he learned to walk, the whole house seemed to tilt in his direction. Callum needed new shoes. Callum needed a tutor. Callum needed a quieter room to study. Callum needed the last piece of cake because he had a long day. I learned early that needing something made people tired, so I stopped needing. But my grandmother, Agnes Vale, noticed everything. She noticed when I said I wasn't hungry because there was only enough roast left for Callum. She noticed when I wore the same winter coat 3 years in a row. She noticed when my mother interrupted me mid-sentence and never came back to what I had been saying. Grandma Agnes lived 22 minutes away in Sparrow House. Every Friday afternoon, she picked me up from school in her old green station wagon with one missing hubcap and a cracked leather steering wheel. She never asked permission like she expected to be denied. She just appeared. "Maren," she would call from the driver's seat, "bring your backpack. We have bread to make." And I would go. At Sparrow House, there was always soup on the stove, always a folded quilt at the end of the couch, always a radio playing low in the kitchen. Grandma believed a house should sound alive, so she kept windows open whenever the weather allowed it. Wind moved through the rooms. Sparrows scratched at the eaves. The old floorboards answered every step. "People think quiet houses are peaceful," she told me once, kneading dough with both hands. "They're not always peaceful. Sometimes they're just houses where nobody is allowed to speak." I looked down at the flower on the counter. She didn't look at me when she said it. That was how I knew she was talking about my home. Sparrow House was different. There, I could talk. I could ask questions. I could burn the first pancake and not be called careless. I could sit on the porch steps for an hour without anyone asking me to move. When I was 13, Grandma taught me how to sand the porch railing. When I was 14, she taught me how to balance a checkbook. When I was 15, she showed me where the water shutoff valve was in the basement. "Every woman should know where the water shuts off," she said, handing me a flashlight. "Especially if the men in her life act like plumbing is a personality trait." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the flashlight. Grandma had a way of making me feel like the world was survivable. Back at my parents' house, things were changing. My father's insurance office was struggling, though nobody said that out loud at first. Bills arrived in thick envelopes. Phone calls were taken in the garage. My mother started clipping coupons, but still bought Callum a used car for his 16th birthday because, as she said, "a boy needs independence." When I asked if I could use the car to drive to my weekend shift at the library, my father looked at me like I had asked for a yacht. "That car is for your brother," he said. "I can pay for gas." That's not the point. It never was. The first time I heard them talk about Sparrow House as if Grandma were already dead, I was 17. I had come downstairs for water, and my parents were at the kitchen table with my Uncle Victor. Victor was my mother's older brother. He sold commercial property and smiled too much when money was being discussed. My father had a folder open in front of him. My mother was rubbing her temple. Victor said, "That street is changing. Give it 5 years. That whole block will be rentals. Agnes is sitting on more value than she realizes." My mother whispered, "She'll never sell." Victor gave a little laugh. "She won't live forever." I stood frozen in the hallway with my hand around a glass. My father did not correct him. My mother did not look ashamed. That was the first time I understood that some people don't wait for grief. They wait for access. Grandma Agnes got sick when I was 22. It started with small things. She forgot the kettle on the stove. She misplaced her reading glasses inside the refrigerator. She called me one afternoon and asked whether I had remembered to feed the chickens. She had not owned chickens in 30 years. My mother said it was normal aging. My father said assisted living was too expensive. Victor said Sparrow House could solve the whole problem if everyone stopped being sentimental. I drove to Grandma's every evening after work. I cooked. I cleaned. I labeled drawers. I taped a note beside the stove that said, "Check the burners." Some nights she was herself. Sharp. Funny. Still able to catch every silence in a room. Other nights she looked at me like I was someone she almost recognized from a dream. One rainy Tuesday, while I was folding towels in the laundry room, she called my name. Marin. I found her sitting at the kitchen table. In front of her was an old metal recipe box, the blue one with chipped paint and a dent in the lid. She pushed it toward me. "If I forget later," she said, "remember now." My hands went still. "What do you mean?" She tapped the box. "Not everything valuable looks official, and not everything official is true." I sat down slowly. "Grandma, are you okay?" "No," she said, and then she smiled. "But I am still me today, so listen." She told me there were papers. She told me she had gone to an attorney 2 years earlier. She told me Sparrow House would not pass through the family the way my parents expected. "My daughter sees roofs and walls," she said. "Your father sees debt relief. Victor sees commission. You see home." I started crying before she finished. She reached across the table and squeezed my wrist. "Don't cry yet. Cry later if you have to. Right now, remember." I nodded. She told me the attorney's name was Helena Morris. She told me there would be a will, but also another document. "The last paper matters most," she said. I asked where it was. She smiled like the answer hurt her. "You'll know when they lie." I hated that answer. I needed something clear. A drawer, a folder, a safe code. But Grandma Agnes had always believed that truth should be protected from people who only searched when they wanted to steal. She died 3 years later, in October, just after the first cold rain of the season. I was 25. The funeral was held at St. Brigid's, where she had played piano for 41 years. My mother wore black and cried beautifully. My father stood beside her with one hand on her shoulder, accepting condolences like a man accepting proof of his own goodness. Callum arrived late in a gray suit that still had the store tag stitched to the sleeve. Victor stood near the back with his phone in his hand. At the cemetery, rain dotted the polished wood of the casket. I stood under a black umbrella and thought about Sparrow House. The porch, the kitchen window, the recipe box, Grandma's hand on my wrist. If I forget later, remember now. After the service, everyone gathered at my parents' house. There were trays of sandwiches and paper cups of coffee. People said things like, "She was a wonderful woman, and at least she isn't suffering." Victor cornered my father near the hallway. I heard him say, "The sooner we move, the cleaner it is." My father's reply was low. "We'll talk after the will is read." I looked at my mother. She was laughing softly at something one of the church ladies had said. Her eyes were dry now. Nobody mentioned that I had spent the last 3 years feeding Grandma, bathing her, sleeping on her couch when she was afraid of shadows in the hallway. Nobody mentioned that Sparrow House still had my extra clothes in the upstairs dresser. Nobody mentioned me at all. 2 weeks later, the family gathered in Helena Morris's office. Helena was a small woman in her 60s with silver haircut just below her chin and a voice that made every sentence sound final. My parents sat together. Callum sat beside them, scrolling on his phone. Victor came even though nobody had invited him. I sat alone near the window. Helena opened the will. Grandma had left small things to people. Her pearl earrings to my mother. Her piano bench to the church. Her fountain pen to Callum, though I wasn't sure he had ever written anything longer than a parking ticket appeal. Then Helena reached the house. Sparrow House, located at 48 Renfield Road, including the land, fixtures, and outbuildings, is left to my granddaughter, Marin Elise Holt. My mother inhaled sharply. My father's face hardened. Victor stopped leaning back in his chair. I could not move. Helena continued. The property is not to be sold for a period of 5 years following my death, unless Marin Elise Holt chooses otherwise. My father spoke first. That can't be right. Helena looked at him over her glasses. It is right. My wife is her daughter. Yes, so the house should pass to Marianne. Mrs. Vale made a different decision. My mother's voice shook. Agnes was confused near the end. Helena closed the folder. This will was executed 3 years ago, before her diagnosis progressed. There are 2 physician letters attached confirming capacity. Victor leaned forward. 5 years is unreasonable. It was her condition. My father turned to me then, not with hurt, with accusation. You knew? I shook my head. Not completely, not enough. But I remembered the recipe box. I remembered the last paper. And I remembered the way Grandma had looked at me like she was trying to hand me a lantern before the dark came. For the first year, they did not fight openly. They just froze me out. My mother stopped inviting me for Sunday dinner. My father called only when property taxes were due, even though I paid them myself. Callum joked at Thanksgiving that I had become the little landlord. Everyone laughed except me. I moved into Sparrow House that winter. The first night, I slept in Grandma's old room because it was the warmest. The house groaned in the cold. The radiator clicked. A branch tapped the upstairs window. I should have felt alone. Instead, I felt watched over. Not in a spooky way. In the way a person feels when someone who loved them arranged the blankets before leaving. I worked at the county library during the day and repaired the house at night. I painted the pantry shelves. I replaced the cracked tile in the downstairs bathroom. I planted rosemary beside the porch. Every task felt like answering Grandma. Take care of it. I am. The trouble started in the 3rd year. My father's insurance office finally closed. Callum's restaurant investment failed. My mother called me one evening and asked if we could talk like adults. That phrase had never once been followed by respect. She arrived at Sparrow House wearing a beige coat and a careful smile. She stood in the kitchen looking around as if the room had personally insulted her. This place is too much for you, she said. I poured tea. It's fine. It's old. So was Grandma. Her mouth tightened. Marin, don't be difficult. There it was. The word that appears when a woman says no in a voice people can't bend. She sat at the table. Your father is in a hard position. Callum is trying to get back on his feet. This house could help everyone if you weren't so attached to it. It was left to me. It was left to you because your grandmother was angry with me. No, it was left to me because I loved it. My mother looked toward the window. Outside, the peach trees were bare, black branches against a gray sky. Love doesn't pay bills. I thought about all the nights Grandma had sat at this table with a checkbook and a calculator. I know, I said. That's why I have a job. My mother left without finishing her tea. 2 days later, my father came. He did not sit. He walked around the kitchen touching things. The back of a chair, the windowsill, the old stove. Not like a son remembering his mother. Like a man estimating resale condition. I spoke to someone, he said. About what? The house? I folded the dish towel in my hands. It isn't for sale. Everything is for sale at the right number. Not this. He turned toward me. You're being selfish. That word landed hard, but not because I believed it, because I knew he did. He looked at the house where his mother had lived and saw rescue money. He looked at me and saw an obstacle. Grandma put a 5-year restriction in the will, I said. Restrictions can be challenged, then challenge it. His face changed, just slightly. He had expected fear. He had prepared for guilt. He had not prepared for calm. You think that lawyer will protect you forever? No, I said. I think Grandma already did. I didn't know then how true that was. The next 6 months were pressure. Small at first, then constant. Callum texted me links to articles about maximizing inherited property value. My mother left voicemails about family unity. My father sent me a spreadsheet showing how the sale could benefit everyone. Victor called twice and said he had buyers ready. I ignored him. Then the letters started. Not legal letters. Not yet. Just envelopes from property companies, cash offers, development interest, preliminary proposals. One company appeared again and again. Hawthorne Urban Group. They wanted the land because Renfield Road had become popular with young renters. Coffee shop on the corner. New bus line. City improvements coming the next year. Sparrow House was no longer just an old blue house with roses. It was a parcel. A number. A chance. I called Helena Morris. She listened quietly while I explained. Then she said, "Have they asked you to sign anything?" "No, they will. What do I do?" "Nothing without me." There was a pause. Then she added, "And Marin?" "Yes? Find the recipe box." My whole body went still. "What?" "The blue metal recipe box. Your grandmother instructed me to tell you that if the pressure ever became active, you should find it." I looked toward the pantry. The box was on the top shelf. I had kept it there because it hurt too much to open. After the call, I climbed onto a chair and brought it down. Inside were index cards in Grandma's handwriting. Peach cobbler, chicken soup, lemon bread. I lifted them carefully. At the bottom was a folded piece of wax paper. Inside that was a small brass key. No note, no explanation, just a key. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time holding it. Then I remembered something. The sewing cabinet upstairs. Grandma had kept it locked when I was little, not because it held anything dangerous, but because she said some things needed waiting. I ran upstairs. The brass key fit. Inside the cabinet were fabric scraps, old buttons, thread spools, and beneath all of it, a flat envelope sealed with tape yellowed at the edges. My name was written across the front. Marin Elise Holt. Not to be opened after my death. Not important. Just my name. Inside was a document. At the top, in bold letters, it said, "Right of reversion and conditional deed addendum." I did not understand the legal language at first, but I understood enough. Grandma had not just left me the house in her will. 3 years before she died, she had recorded a conditional deed addendum with the county. If anyone attempted to sell, transfer, encumber, or assign interest in Sparrow House without my written consent during the 5-year restriction period, full controlling interest would automatically vest solely and permanently in me, free of any competing family claim. There was also something else, a notarized statement. Grandma's words. If any member of my family attempts to pressure, deceive, or act around my granddaughter regarding this property, let this document serve as proof of my intent. Sparrow House belongs to Marin. Not because she is owed money, but because she was the only one who understood it was never just money. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just with one hand over my mouth in the quiet upstairs room where Grandma used to sew curtains and hum old church songs. The last paper. That was what she meant. The will gave me the house. But this paper protected me from the people who would try to take it. I called Helena the next morning. When I told her I had found it, she exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. "Bring it to me today." I did. She examined every page. The stamp, the signatures, the recording number. Then she looked up at me. "Your grandmother was very thorough. She knew? She suspected that they would do this?" Helena's face softened. "She loved your mother, Marin. But love and trust are not the same thing." I looked down at the document. That sentence stayed with me. Love and trust are not the same thing. I wish someone had told me that when I was younger. It would have saved me years of trying to earn, both from people who only offered one when they needed something. Helena made certified copies. She told me she would file a protective notice with the county if anyone attempted anything. Then she asked me if I had a safe place to stay. I laughed once. "This is my house." "I know," she said. "That is not what I asked. That was when I understood she was not worried about the house. She was worried about me. 3 weeks later, my father invited me to dinner. Not at my parents' house. At a restaurant. That was how I knew something was wrong. My family did not use restaurants for apologies. They used them for performances. The place was called Laurel and Maine, one of those warm little restaurants with low lighting and linen napkins where people speak softly because the bill is high. My parents were already seated when I arrived. Callum was there, too. Victor sat at the end of the table in a navy jacket, smiling like a man who had already counted money he did not have. I almost turned around. But Grandma had taught me never to leave a room just because someone else wanted control of it. So I sat. My mother reached for my hand. I let her touch my fingers, then pulled back to open my menu. "We ordered appetizers," she said. "That's nice." My father cleared his throat. "Marin, we wanted to talk in a neutral place." "About Sparrow House," Victor chuckled. "Straight to it." "You always were sharp." I looked at him. He stopped chuckling. My father placed a folder on the table. "There's an opportunity. A very good one. Hawthorne Urban Group has made a strong offer." I did not open the folder. How strong? $820,000. My breath caught. Not because I wanted to sell. Because for the first time, I understood the size of the hunger sitting across from me. My mother leaned forward. "Think what that could do. Your father could settle debts. Callum could restart. You could buy something newer, safer. We could all breathe again." "We?" She blinked. "Yes, we." As a family, I looked at the folder. "Who contacted Hawthorne?" Victor lifted his hand slightly. I made an introduction. "On property you don't own." His smile thinned. "Don't be dramatic." My father pushed the folder closer. "All we need is your signature acknowledging the sale." I opened it then. The agreement had already been drafted. Buyer, Hawthorne Urban Group. Seller, Russell and Marianne Holt, with consent of Marin Holt. Closing date, 45 days. My name was on page 6. A blank line waited for my signature. My parents had negotiated the sale of my house and left a space for me to make their lie true. That is a special kind of betrayal. Not a loud one, a tidy one. The kind printed on expensive paper with little yellow tabs where your obedience is supposed to go. I closed the folder. No, my mother's face changed first. Not shock, irritation. "Marin, no!" Callum sat back. "Are you serious? You live in an old house alone like some tragic librarian, and you're turning down almost $1 million? I'm not turning it down. I was never offering it." My father's voice dropped. "You need to think carefully." "I have." Victor leaned forward. "Legally, there may be family interests you don't understand." I looked right at him, then explained them. He looked away first. My mother whispered, "After everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes pain circles back around and becomes absurd. Everything they had done for me. A childhood of leftovers. A lifetime of being asked to understand. Years of watching love become conditional whenever money entered the room. I folded my napkin. "I'm going home." My father grabbed my wrist before I could stand. Not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to remind me who he thought he was. "You will not walk away from this family." The table went quiet. A waiter near the bar looked over. I looked down at his hand, then up at his face. "I already did," I said. "You just didn't notice because you were busy selling my house." He let go. I left the restaurant with my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. That night, I sat on Grandma's porch with the lights off. The roses moved in the dark. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice. I wanted to call my mother and ask why. I wanted to ask when she had stopped seeing me as her daughter and started seeing me as a key to a locked door. But I knew the answer. She hadn't stopped suddenly. She had practiced for years. The next morning, Helena called. "Marin, did you sign anything last night?" "No." "Good." Her voice was too calm. "What happened?" "There has been a title inquiry on Sparrow House from Hawthorne Urban Group's legal department." My stomach tightened. "When?" "Yesterday afternoon. Before dinner. Before the folder. Before the little yellow tabs. They had already started." Helena continued. "I'm going to file the certified addendum today as a protective notice. It was already recorded years ago, but I want it attached clearly to the current title search. Do it. There's more." I closed my eyes. There usually is. Hawthorne appears to have received a signed representation from your parents stating they have authority to sell. I opened my eyes. They what? A seller's authority affidavit. But they don't have authority. No, they don't. Is that illegal? It can be depending on what they represented and whether they knew it was false. I thought of my father's hand on my wrist, my mother saying, "After everything we've done for you." Victor smiling. "File everything," I said. Helena did. At 8:37 that morning, she recorded the protective notice. At 9:12, Hawthorne's title company pulled the updated record. At 9:26, my father called me. I let it ring. At 9:27, my mother called. I let it ring. At 9:31, Victor called. I answered. He did not say hello. "What did you file?" I was standing in Grandma's kitchen, one hand on the counter she had wiped clean every night for 50 years. The truth. Victor's voice sharpened. "You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. You're going to blow up a legitimate deal. It was never legitimate. You selfish little." I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the strange feeling of finally hearing what someone thinks of you when politeness stops being useful. By noon, Hawthorne Urban Group suspended the purchase agreement pending title review. By 2 o'clock, their attorney requested documentation from Helena. By 4 o'clock, they had it. By 5:30, the deal was dead. Not delayed. Dead. Because the last paper did more than protect the house. It exposed the lie. My parents had signed an affidavit claiming they had the legal right to sell Sparrow House. They had not. Victor had introduced them as sellers. He had no authority. Hawthorne had spent money on surveys, architectural plans, legal review, and pre-development filings based on that false authority. The next day, a courier delivered a letter to my parents' house. Cease and desist. Preservation of evidence. Notice of potential civil claim for misrepresentation. My father came to Sparrow House that evening. He did not knock. He used the spare key under the flower pot. Except I had changed the locks 2 weeks earlier. He stood on the porch, trying the key twice, then looked through the window and saw me standing in the hallway. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he knocked. I opened the door but kept the chain on. His face was red. "You changed the locks?" "Yes! This was my mother's house. It is my house now." His jaw worked. "You've destroyed us." "No. I stopped you from selling what wasn't yours." He held up the letter. "Do you know what this is?" "Yes! They're threatening to sue." "They probably will." His voice cracked then, but not with sadness. With anger dressed as panic. "You think you're so righteous because Agnes gave you a house. But you have no idea what it costs to keep a family alive." I looked at him through the narrow opening. "A family shouldn't need me to disappear to survive." He stared at me. Behind him, the porch light flickered once. For the first time, he looked older than his age. Not fragile, just exposed. "Open the door," he said. "No, I'm your father. I know." That was the saddest part. I did know. I knew the man outside my door had once lifted me onto his shoulders at a county fair. I knew he had taught me to check my oil before long drives. I knew he had signed birthday cards with love, Dad. And I knew he had tried to sell the only place where I had ever felt fully wanted. Both things were true. That is what betrayal does. It does not erase the good memories. It poisons them. He left after 10 minutes of standing there with the letter in his hand. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. I went to work. I shelved books. I helped a little boy find a book about sharks. I smiled at elderly patrons who asked if the copier was broken. Then I went home to Sparrow House and checked the locks before dark. On Friday, Callum came by. He looked tired. Not his usual careless tired. A different kind. The kind that comes from realizing your parents' mess has your name on it, too. He stood on the porch holding a paper bag. "I brought sandwiches. I'm not hungry." "They're from Bell's Deli." I looked at the bag. Grandma used to take me there after dentist appointments. I opened the door. Callum stepped inside slowly, like he was entering a church after doing something wrong. He looked around the kitchen. I forgot how small it was. It feels bigger when people aren't trying to sell it. He flinched. Good. We sat at the table. He took out 2 sandwiches, 2 napkins, 2 cans of iced tea. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I didn't know they signed that affidavit." I believed him. Callum was selfish sometimes, careless often. But he was not strategic enough to hide something that big. "I knew about the offer," he said. "I knew they wanted you to sign. I didn't know they'd already told Hawthorne they had authority. Would it have changed anything?" He looked at me. "I don't know. It was the first honest thing anyone in my family had said in weeks. I nodded. He stared at the table. Mom says you're punishing everyone. Mom says a lot of things. Dad says Grandma manipulated you. I smiled a little. Grandma couldn't manipulate a vending machine. She just knew people. Callum almost smiled too. Then his face changed. Did she really leave it only to you? Yes. Why? I looked around the kitchen. The chipped blue cabinet, the window over the sink, the recipe box sitting on the shelf. Because I showed up. He nodded slowly. I don't think he liked the answer, but I think he understood it. Before he left, he stopped at the door. Victor is scared. He should be. Dad, too. He should be, too. What about Mom? I looked out at the porch. Mom is angry because fear makes her feel weak. Callum looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then he left. 2 weeks later, Hawthorne filed suit. Not against me. Against my parents and Victor. The complaint listed misrepresentation, false authority, reliance damages, and reimbursement for costs. Victor's brokerage suspended him pending review. My father's name appeared in the local paper because civil filings are public and small towns feed on public records like dry grass feeds fire. My mother stopped going to church for a month. People called me brave. People called me cruel. One woman at the grocery store touched my arm near the produce section and whispered, "Your grandmother would be proud." Another woman near the checkout said loudly, "Some children forget who raised them. I bought apples and said nothing." That was something Grandma had taught me too. Not every accusation deserves the dignity of your defense. The hardest part was not the lawsuit. It was the silence after. Because once the fight became public, my parents stopped calling. No apologies, no explanations, no attempts to understand, just silence. At first, it felt like punishment. Then slowly, painfully, it started to feel like space. I painted the porch that spring. Soft white. Grandma had always wanted to do it, but said the weather never cooperated long enough. I sanded the railing where my hands used to rest when I was a child. I planted lavender along the walkway. I replaced the broken mailbox with one that looked almost exactly like the old one, crooked flag and all. Every repair felt like stitching a wound. Not closed, but clean. One afternoon, Helena called and asked me to come to her office. I thought there was another problem. There wasn't. She had an envelope on her desk. Cream paper. My name on the front in Grandma's handwriting. "I was instructed to give you this after the property matter was fully defended," Helena said. Fully defended? The deadline for your parents to challenge the addendum has passed. Hawthorne has withdrawn all interest in the property. The title is clean. Sparrow House is yours, without condition now. I sat down slowly. Without condition. The words landed softly, like a door closing behind danger. I opened Grandma's letter. Her handwriting was weaker than I remembered, but still hers. She wrote that if I was reading it, then someone had tried. She was sorry for that. Not surprised, but sorry. She wrote that houses collect truth the way curtains collect sunlight. Slowly, quietly, until one day the whole room is changed by it. She wrote that she had watched me become small in rooms where I should have been safe, and she had promised herself she would leave me one room where nobody could make me shrink. Then came the line that broke me. Sparrow House is not your reward for being the good one, Marin. It is your shelter for the years they made you believe you needed to earn shelter. I folded over the desk. I cried into my hands in Helena Morris's quiet office while traffic moved outside and someone laughed on the sidewalk below. Helena did not rush me. When I could breathe again, she slid a box of tissues across the desk. There's one more thing. I almost laughed through the tears. Of course there is. She smiled gently. Your grandmother created a maintenance fund for the house. Modest, but helpful. Just under $74,000 now with interest. It can only be used for repairs, taxes, utilities, and preservation. I looked at the letter again. Grandma had not just left me a house. She had left me time. That is what people with love do when they can. They don't just hand you something beautiful and let it crush you. They leave instructions. They leave keys. They leave one last paper. The settlement happened in July. Hawthorne agreed to drop part of the claim against my parents if they reimbursed documented costs over time. Victor took the worst of it because he had presented himself as the broker with knowledge of the title. His license was suspended for 18 months. He sold his lake boat, then his condo. My father entered a repayment agreement. My mother got a job managing appointments at a dental office across town. Callum moved out of their basement and started working full-time at a warehouse. Nobody in my family became homeless. Nobody starved. Nobody lost everything. They just lost the fantasy that my inheritance could fix consequences they had spent years creating. That is an important difference. A few months later, my mother called. It was the first time her name had appeared on my phone since the lawsuit. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. There was a long pause. Marin. Her voice sounded smaller. Not softer. Smaller. Are you busy? Yes. Another pause. Oh, I could have filled the silence. The old me would have. The old me would have rushed to make her comfortable. I did not. I wanted to ask if we could meet, she said. For what? To talk? About what? She exhaled. Everything. We met at Bell's Deli on a Thursday afternoon. Neutral. Public. Familiar. She arrived wearing a navy cardigan and no lipstick. That alone told me more than an apology would have. She looked tired. I did too. We sat in a booth near the window. For a while, she stirred her tea without drinking it. Then she said, I was angry at my mother for choosing you. I looked at her. She stared into her cup. I told myself she did it to punish me, for not visiting enough, for putting her in care, for things that happened years ago. Maybe some of that was true, she flinched. I did not take it back. But that doesn't explain what you did, I said. Her fingers tightened around the spoon. No, it was the first time she had not defended herself. I let your father convince me the house could save us, she said. And I let Victor convince me it was just paperwork. You went through with it because you wanted to. Her eyes filled. Yes, that yes did something to me. It did not heal everything. It did not undo the folder at the restaurant or the affidavit or the way she had made me feel greedy for keeping what was mine. But it was a crack in the wall. A real one. Not enough to walk through yet. Enough to see light. I don't know how to be your daughter the way you want me to be, I said. My mother wiped under one eye. I don't know how to be your mother without needing something from you. It was a terrible sentence. But it was honest. And honesty, even ugly honesty, was more than I had gotten from her in years. I need boundaries, I said. She nodded. The house is not a topic. Another nod. You don't come by without asking. I understand. You don't speak to Victor about me. Her mouth tightened, but she nodded again. And you don't call me selfish for protecting myself, she cried then, quietly, into a paper napkin at Bell's Deli while a teenager behind the counter called order number 42. I did not reach across the table. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because I had spent my whole life confusing comfort with surrender. I sat with her instead. That was all I could offer. And for once, it had to be enough. My father took longer. He did not call until November. By then, the peach trees behind Sparrow House had gone bare again. The roses were cut back. The porch rail was smooth under my hand. His message was simple. Can I come see the house? I listened to it 4 times. Not because I didn't understand the words, because I understood all the things he did not say. Can I come see the house? Can I see what my mother chose? Can I stand inside the place I tried to sell? Can I look at you without the lie between us? I almost deleted it. Then I called him back. Saturday, 2 o'clock, 1 hour. He came alone. No folder. No mother. No Victor. He stood on the porch in a brown jacket, holding nothing but his car keys. When I opened the door, he looked past me into the hallway. It smells the same, he said. Mostly. He stepped inside. His eyes moved slowly over the walls, the staircase, the framed embroidery Grandma had made, the kitchen table where she had fed us all at different points in our lives. He touched the back of a chair, not like an appraiser this time, like a son. We walked through the house in silence. In the upstairs room, he stopped beside the sewing cabinet. Mom kept buttons in there. She kept a lot more than buttons. He looked at me. I let the sentence sit. Downstairs, I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. For 10 minutes, he said nothing. Then he looked at the window over the sink. I thought selling it would make everything right. No, I said. You thought money would make you feel less wrong. His jaw tightened, then loosened. I hated that she gave it to you. I know. I thought it meant she loved you more. I looked down at my mug. Maybe it meant she trusted me more. He closed his eyes. That one hurt him. I could see it. But truth is not cruelty just because it lands hard. I'm sorry, he said. The words were rough, unpracticed, maybe incomplete, but real enough to hear. I nodded. I'm not ready to forgive everything. I know. I don't know if I ever will. He swallowed. I know. We drank coffee in the house he had tried to sell. Outside, a sparrow landed on the porch railing and shook rain from its feathers. For the first time in years, my father smiled at something that had no price. It did not fix us, but it was a beginning, a small one. And small beginnings are still beginnings. The following spring, I opened Sparrow House once a month for community dinners. Nothing fancy. Soup, bread, long tables borrowed from the church basement. Anyone could come. Elderly neighbors, single mothers, college students, men who worked construction down by the river and came in still smelling like sawdust. I did it because Grandma had believed houses should feed people. Not developers, not pride, people. The first dinner, 18 people came. The second, 31. By summer, we had to set up tables on the porch. Callum came sometimes and washed dishes without being asked. My mother brought lemon bars once and left them on the counter with a note. For the table, not for leverage. That made me laugh. Then cry. Then laugh again. My father came in September with a bag of peaches from the farmer's market. He didn't stay long. But before he left, he fixed the loose hinge on the back gate. No announcement. No speech. Just a screwdriver, 10 quiet minutes, and a gate that closed properly for the first time in years. I watched from the kitchen window. Maybe that was his apology in a language he knew better. I accepted the repair. Not the past. Not yet. Just the repair. Sometimes that is how families heal. Not with one grand confession, but with a hinge, a meal, a phone call answered carefully. A boundary respected twice in a row. Victor never apologized. He sent one message through Callum asking if I would put in a good word with the licensing board. I did not respond. Some people mistake silence for weakness because they have never seen it used as a locked door. By the end of the 5-year period, Sparrow House was fully mine in every way that mattered. Legally, emotionally, spiritually, if you believe houses have that kind of memory. I stood on the porch the morning the restriction expired, holding Grandma's letter in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. The sky was pale gold. The sparrows were loud under the eaves. The peach trees had fruit on them for the first time in years. Small, green, not ready yet, but growing. I thought about the headline people in town had given me. The granddaughter who stopped the sale. The woman who took the house. The selfish one. The brave one. The cold one. The lucky one. People love simple names for complicated survival. But none of those names felt true. I was not brave every day. I was terrified on plenty of them. I was not cold. I felt everything. I was not lucky. I was loved by one woman who knew how to plan, and I did not take the house. I kept it. There is a difference. My parents sold my inheritance behind my back because they thought paperwork was just paper. They thought if they moved fast enough, smiled publicly enough, and made me feel guilty enough, I would sign wherever they pointed. They forgot one thing. My grandmother knew them before I did. She knew grief can make decent people weak. She knew debt can make proud people dangerous. She knew family can become a word people use when they want access to something they did not earn. So she left me the will. And then she left me the last paper. The paper that said no. The paper that said stop. The paper that said this girl is not alone, even if I am gone. That is what saved me. Not revenge. Not anger. Not even courage. Preparation saved me. Love with a signature saved me. A house full of memory saved me. If you are listening to this and someone in your life keeps calling you selfish for protecting what was entrusted to you, I want you to hear me clearly. You are allowed to keep the promise. You are allowed to lock the door. You are allowed to say no without turning it into a debate. And you are allowed to love people from a distance when loving them up close requires betraying yourself. Peace did not come to me all at once. It came slowly. In the sound of sparrows under the porch roof, in the smell of bread cooling on Grandma's counter, in the first community dinner where someone said, "This house feels alive." In the day my father fixed the gate and left without asking for anything. In the moment, I realized I no longer checked my phone with fear when my mother's name appeared. Sparrow House knew me when people pretended they didn't. Grandma was right about that. And now, every morning when I open the kitchen window and hear the birds start, their noise under the eaves, I say the same thing under my breath. I kept it. I kept the house. I kept the promise. And somehow, after all of that, I kept myself too. That's my story. If it made you feel something, anger, relief, hope, or even just recognition, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to protect something your family thought they had the right to take? A home, a memory, a promise, a piece of yourself? I read every comment. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to remember that love is not always loud. Sometimes love is a locked drawer, a hidden key, and one last paper waiting for the day you finally need it.